Okay, so we would like to talk about indifference curves. Okay, so remember last time we talked about utility, and we said that utility simply refers to what, to the amount of satisfaction that is derived from consuming a particular good or a service. We can actually be able to quantify that in units called what, in units called utils. But today I want us to look at indifference curves. What indifference curves show is simply what they actually show a combination of two goods that actually give equal what, satisfaction. So a combination of two goods that give equal satisfaction can be represented by an indifference what, an indifference curve. If you're looking at, for example, here, I actually have given two goods. We have good X and good what, good Y. So there's our good X, there's our good what, there's our good Y. And if you're looking at, for example, indifference curve 1, I1, you can see that we have a combination of X, Y, and Z. Okay, X, the Y, and Z. And these actually are said to be giving a combination of what, equal satisfaction. For example, if you had Z there, you that the consumer is willing to consume quantity of X of this much and is willing to consume quantity of Y of that much. At point Y, the consumer is willing to consume quantity of X there and is willing to consume quantity of Y there. So in other words, there you see that we actually have a combination of good X and Y, and we are looking at what combination gives us equal satisfaction. So at point X, Y, and Z, the consumer there has equal satisfaction from a combination of goods X and what? And Y. I want you also to know that it is very important to actually note that consumers always seek to maximize their satisfaction by going for a higher indifference curve. So they prefer the highest indifference curve, but that's the one that gives them what, a higher amount of what, of utility or satisfaction. So in other words, in this case, we are saying that the consumer would prefer from these three indifference curves, the consumer obviously prefers indifference curve 3, because indifference curve 3 is the one that gives the highest level of satisfaction. Okay, we are not required to know a lot about indifference curves according to our syllabus, but we need to actually have an understanding of how they work and how they are, so that we are able to understand what we call budget lines. Okay, now remember I said that consumers are willing to maximize their satisfaction by going for the highest what indifference curve, but there's only one thing that limits them now that you need to understand, and that particular thing is what we call budget lines. Okay, when you're talking about budget lines, basically they are the ones that restrict how much the consumers are likely to spend on good X and good Y. Okay, so we actually call them budget what, budget lines. It's very important to understand them. Like for example, let's say for example we have a consumer here who actually has $200 to spend. Okay, the consumer has $200 to what, to spend between good Y and good what, good X. Good Y costing $20 and good X costing $10. You can see that here, if the consumer decides to spend to actually consume 10 units of Y, obviously the consumer will be left with $0 to spend on X, because look, 20 times 10, $200 is gone. Okay, so what is going to limit the consumer here is the amount of money that is available to him or to her. So by consuming 10 units there, the consumer will be left with nothing to spend on X. If the consumer spends, if it consumes 9 units of Y, that means 9 times 20 gives us what, 180. So this means that the consumer will be left with what, with $20 to spend it on X. So $20 to spend on X gives us how much? 2 units, because for X each unit is costing $10. So if you say 10 times 2, you get 20. The same applies here. If the consumer goes for 80 units of Y, that will give 160. If you say 8 times 20, we'll spend 160 on Y, which leaves us with 40 to spend on X. So $40 on X gives us 4 units, because each unit is costing $10. So you can see that this information can be plotted in the form of a diagram. okay, which we now call the what? The budget line. As you can see here, this is the budget what? Is the budget line. What we simply did here is we plotted the information on what? We plotted the information on this particular graph here. So it actually gives us what we call the budget line. If the consumer spends on 10Y, basically the consumer will be left with nothing to spend on X. So as you can see here, and if you spend like 20 on X, that will be 20 times 10. The consumer will have 0 units of Y. So this is known as the budget line that we are seeing here. What the budget line will simply do is that it will constrain us, no matter how we may want to actually go towards buying what? More of goods X and Y. What restricts us is what? Is the budget line. How much do we have to spend on buying good X and good Y? And I also want you to know something which is also very much interesting and very important. If you are checking also, sometimes, let's say for example, in this case, in this scenario, from this fig that I'm just showing you on the screen, if you are looking at it here, the price for good X has changed. Okay, let's assume that the price for good X has fallen. You can see that can actually cause the consumers to actually spend more. Okay, they were once consuming 20, probably because for good X, the price was what? The price was, say, $10, but the price goes to $5. The consumers can actually now be able to buy 40. So if you look at it, our budget line shifts like that from 20 to 40. But here it remains pivoted there at Y. It remains pivoted because why? The price for Y did not change. So the consumers actually are buying more of the one whose price has changed. Okay, so that gives us another important scenario known as the substitution effect and the income effect. Whenever there is a change or a shift in the budget line, that is caused by either the income effect or the substitution what effect. The income effect actually occurs like following a price decrease. Okay, like in this scenario, we know that we are saying X has decreased in terms of its price, good X, and the consumer here has actually decided to actually spend more money on buying that particular good whose price has fallen. So the consumer increases from buying 20 to what? To 40. That is called the income effect. Okay, are you getting that? So the price falls for good X and the consumer now has more real income. So the consumer will buy more of that particular one whose price has fallen. That is called the income effect. But sometimes, let's say for example, let's assume that it was good Y actually whose price fell. But the consumer now did not buy more of good Y. Okay, the consumer decided to buy more of good X. The consumer took, right, part of that particular amount that was earned from good Y and now spent it on X. That one is called the substitution effect because the consumer now is substituting good Y for good what? For good X. So we call it the substitution effect. So you need to know that whenever a budget line shifts, it's because of either the income effect or the substitution what? Effect. I'm going to introduce another important aspect of how sometimes you can be able to combine these budget lines with indifference curves. Okay, I'm going to actually explain that in the next